Facebook is very deceptive, particularly when you post vacation photos. A journey as portrayed on Facebook can look absolutely pure and perfect, and the recent journey that Kathy and I took to Scotland and England was no exception. I enjoyed posting the extraordinarily beautiful scenery, the selfies of Kathy and me enjoying a great meal or wonderful beer, that little bit of indulgence in narcissism. I enjoyed posting photos of the sacred sites we visited and which meant so much to us, and the friends, new and old, we spent time with. Someone asked me when I returned to rate our trip on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being just about perfect, and I said immediately, it was a 10, and I meant it. But Facebook can be deceptive, because woven in and through any journey that we take are things like a 6-hour flight delay in Baltimore that left us despairing that we would make our overseas flight on a budget airline from Hartford to Edinburgh, and left me for a moment feeling like I just wanted to turn around and go back home. We did make our flight, but had to leave a checked bag in Hartford to do it. Facebook did not tell the story of the day in which we left Iona, the Holy Isle in the Scottish Hebrides, and went to London to spend special time with dear friends. We had taken 2 ferries, an hour-and-a-half bus trip, a 4-hour train ride, and a taxi ride, and then faced 2 flight delays from Glasgow to London, necessitating an extra night in an airport hotel. Facebook did not show the doctor's visit for a pulled muscle or getting on a wrong subway and finding myself hopelessly lost when I was trying to meet Kathy and a friend on the other side of the city, both of whom I could not reach because my cell phone had run out of battery. Well, I can hear both my wife and daughter saying to me, "First world problems." But bottom line, it was a journey of a lifetime. It was a 10. But like all of our life journeys, hidden beneath the surface of those Facebook photos were the stories and realities that are a part of any journey. Maybe you remember some of your journeys and the beauty but the challenges that are there. But it's also a story of our life's journey. The journey of a church, the journey of our country, or the journey of our own souls. A journey always means willingly or unwillingly leaving the home we know, the routines that are familiar to us, a sense of control over our lives, and a degree of comfort in order to stretch out and embrace the new, the wondrous, and the perilous. A journey means leaving the predictable in order to live with a greater degree of unpredictability. A journey invites us to let go of our accustomed control and place ourselves in the hands of others. No matter how much we plan, how much we prepare, there are frustrations, and we cannot envision all that might befall us. But these are part of the journey. These are part of the vacation, the story, the holiday, our story, the story of our individual journeys. There are moments of grace when all just seems to work together so perfectly, and there are moments when it seems like unseen enemies are working against us. We had the unseen enemies of airline flights this time. Why does this always keep happening to us? We ask ourselves in those particular moments. Well, that image in Jesus' parable of the weeds and the wheat, the field full of nourishing wheat and toxic weeds. And it is a parable, despite the details, about the field, not about the people. But that field, that mixed bag of a field in Jesus' parable, is that same kind of mixed bag of a journey. It's about the journey of a field that is not pure. Jesus describes how by night, which means unseen and unrecognized, a hateful force sullies that perfect field of nourishing pure wheat with weeds. The Greek word zizania could refer to a kind of noxious darnel, which used to appear in wheat fields and intermingled its root system with that of the wheat. So if you pulled up the darnel, you'd pull up the wheat as well. But to make matters worse, it was also indistinguishable from the wheat, even to the eyes of experts, until the field had sufficiently matured so they could see the seedlings, and there was a slight variation in the seedlings. And so in ancient time, no matter how hard it was to keep your field pure, darnel could get in. Seedlings could be blown in by the wind, carried on water, or actually sown by night by competing farmers. If you tried to keep your field pure and attempted to rip out what you thought was darnel, you would most likely get confused and wind up ripping out the wheat, or with their root systems intertwined, you would wind up ripping out most of your field and be left with little or nothing. And so they've got to journey together as they are. There's no purity there. There's no perfection. Wheat and weed growing day in, day out, without you really knowing which is which. And ultimately, as the parable said, it's God who knows the difference. But sometimes on our life's journey, we look back and what we thought was wheat were weeds, and we thought were weeds was really more nourishing to our life. Bottom line, no way we can keep our fields pure. No amount of planning, weeding, watchfulness, security systems, profiling, therapy, exercise, diet, education, knowledge can keep the fields of our lives, our churches, our minds free from these zizania. Great word, isn't it? Zizania that afflict us. Almost 20 years ago, as many of you know because I've told this story ad nauseum, but it is transformative in my life, I was the picture of health. I ran daily, I was a vegetarian, I followed all the health recommendations. I prayed daily, I read my Bible, I kept my field pure. Doggone it, I was good. Only wheat would go into my field. Then one day, utterly out of the blue, I became ill with a terrible infection. For a while I was deathly ill with an infection one usually only gets by drinking water in a third world country, but I had not been to a third world country recently, and I was the only one in Tidewater with that infection. Wasn't I lucky? The doctor finally looked at me one day when I was on the healing course, and he shrugged and he said, "You got struck by lightning." "Thanks, doctor." In other words, there was nothing I could have humanly done to prevent it. It was a lightning strike. And that just infuriated me. I recall the quote of Saint Thérèse de Lisieux, "Lord, if this is how you treat your friends, it's no wonder you have so few of them." But you know, I realize now in retrospect that that terrible autumn was the most important part of my journey. I don't want to go through it again. It was weeds on the landscape of my life. But what at the time I thought were poisonous darnel in the pure wheat field of my life I had protected so carefully was in fact the wheat that has nourished the second half of my life. That so-called darnel of illness taught me more about living with my humanity, more about grace, more about compassion, more about patience, more about healing, more about the power of prayer in the community of faith, and more about redemption than any other single event in my life, before or after. A lot of contemporary religion, whether it be Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, gets focused so much on keeping our field pure, keeping our religious communities pure, keeping our thought or our theology pure, keeping our morals pure. But in trying to identify the tares and rip them up and keep our field pure, we do violence to ourselves, to one another, and the world. And Jesus is telling us in the final analysis, despite our attempts to control, we really can't tell the difference. We are dependent only on God's grace. He's not calling us to purity, but to a journey together, a journey with diversity, a journey with all its ups and downs and losses. But he promises that in the end of the journey, we will see and understand what in fact was wheat, what nourished our life and our souls, and what did not. And guess what? Guess what? Despite what we may want to show of our journey on Facebook as our wheat, it may just be that in the end, it was what was hidden, unexpected, challenging, disappointing, that God, in God's redemptive love, has used to nourish abundant life in us. Amen.